More than $1 million. That's what's sitting on the table right now for anyone with information about Nancy Guthrie. $1.2 million to be exact. And nobody has called. Not one person. What I found out about why might be the most disturbing part of this entire case. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 65 days. Taken from her own home in the middle of the night. Blood on the floor. Doors propped open. Doorbell camera ripped off the wall. And since that night, her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, has put up $1 million for anyone who can bring her mother home. The FBI added $100,000, and then a man from Wisconsin, an attorney named Michael Hupy, added another $100,000 of his own money. That brings the total to over $1.2 million, and still silence. Think about that for a second. $1.2 million and not a single person has picked up the phone, not one tip that led anywhere, not one name, not one location, not one piece of useful information, nothing. In most kidnapping cases, a reward this size breaks things open within days. Somebody talks, somebody slips, somebody wants the money badly enough to take the risk. But 65 days into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, nobody has made that call. That's not normal. And the people who study these cases for a living are starting to explain why. But before I get to that, I need to tell you about Michael Hupy, because what he's doing is different from what Savannah did or what the FBI did. Hupy is the president of Crime Stoppers Milwaukee. He's paid out $75,000 in rewards before. He's posted $200,000 to solve crimes in his hometown. This is a man who puts his own money on the line when he believes something needs to happen. He's done it before, and he'll do it again. And when he saw what happened to Nancy, he said something that stopped me cold. He said, "I was very sad that an 84-year-old woman in poor health was taken from her home without her medication. Her heart pacemaker stopped syncing. There's blood at the crime scene, and I thought something had to be done quickly." But here's the part that changes everything. Hupy isn't just offering money. He's telling people where to call, and it's not the sheriff. He said it directly. Avoid the bickering and avoid the nonsense and call Crime Stoppers. That's a quote. A man who put up $100,000 of his own money is telling the public not to call the Pima County Sheriff's Department, not to call the FBI tip line. Call Crime Stoppers instead. Think about what that says about the state of this investigation. Think about what it means when the person funding the reward doesn't trust the people running the case. And the reason he's saying this matters. Crime Stoppers is not a government agency. It is not subject to Freedom of Information laws. When you call, they don't ask for your name. They give you a code number. If your tip leads to an arrest, you collect the reward using that code. No identity, no record. No one ever knows it was you. That's real anonymity. The kind that a government tip line simply cannot offer, and Hupy believes that's what it's going to take, because the people who know something are afraid of being identified, afraid of retaliation, afraid of what happens when the person who took Nancy finds out they talked. If you've been following this case and want to know what happens next, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. This one is far from over. Now, here's the part that kept me up last night. A true crime podcaster named Josh Diaz went on the interview room and said something that reframes the entire case. He said whoever is involved in this is kind of ride or die together now. Ride or die. That's the phrase he used. And what it means is this: the people who took Nancy are bound together. Not by loyalty, by exposure. They can't turn on each other because doing so means turning on themselves. If one of them walks into a police station and says, "I know who did it," the first question they're going to hear is, "How do you know?" And the only honest answer to that question puts them in a cell right next to the person they're trying to turn in. Diaz believes there are 2 to 3 suspects involved, not strangers who met online, not hired hands from out of state, people who knew each other, people who planned this together, working as a unit, coordinated. And the reason no one has come forward despite $1.2 million is that anyone who knows enough to collect that reward also knows enough to be charged as an accomplice. You can't separate yourself from this crime, not when you were part of it. The reward might as well not exist for these people, because claiming it means confessing. But retired FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell sees it differently. She said if there were more than 2 people involved, someone would have gone for the money. That's her exact assessment. The financial incentive is too large. Human nature should have cracked the silence by now. $1.2 million is life-changing money. It's enough to disappear. Enough to start over somewhere nobody knows your name. Enough to make someone think maybe the risk is worth it. But it hasn't happened, not once in 65 days. And that contradiction is what makes this case so haunting. If human nature says someone should have talked by now and nobody has, then something stronger than money is keeping them quiet. So, which is it? Are the suspects staying quiet out of loyalty, or is something else going on? Because there's a third theory, and it's the darkest one. I wasn't sure I should include this, but you need to hear it. Kurt Dabb is a retired homicide detective from Pima County. He spent years working cases in this exact jurisdiction. He knows how criminals operate in this part of Arizona. He knows what desperation looks like. He knows what happens when criminals start turning on each other. And his theory is that the accomplices might not be staying silent by choice. They might be silent because they physically cannot speak anymore. Dabb said it directly. It wouldn't be too hard for the leader of this group, if you will, to make that decision as well, to take out his partners. Let that sink in for a moment. If the person who planned this crime was bold enough to enter an 84-year-old woman's home in the middle of the night, drag her out past a trail of blood, disable every security camera on the street, and vanish without a trace, what would stop them from tying up loose ends? The accomplices are the loose ends. They're the ones who could pick up a phone and collect $1.2 million. They're the ones who could walk into a Crime Stoppers office with a code number and walk out rich. They're the biggest threat to whoever planned this. And if that person is as calculated as the evidence suggests, leaving those threats alive would be the one mistake they wouldn't make. And that might be the real answer to the question everyone keeps asking. Why hasn't anyone come forward? Maybe it's not because they won't. Maybe it's because they can't. Not anymore. Legal expert Bobby Tagavi laid out the psychology behind the silence in a way that connects all 3 theories. He said rewards don't eliminate fear. People may worry about retaliation, being dragged into a high-profile case, or exposing themselves to unrelated legal trouble, and some may not realize the detail they have is important: fear. That's the common thread running through every explanation, whether it's fear of self-incrimination, fear of the people involved, or fear of what's already happened to those who knew too much. Every theory leads back to the same place. Someone is afraid. And the question is whether that fear is keeping them quiet, or whether it already silenced them permanently. Now let me connect this to what we already know. Neighbor Aldine Meister told investigators she saw 2 to 3 people involved, not one. Someone made 3 reconnaissance visits to Nancy's home in January, 3 separate trips to study the property. A Wi-Fi jammer was used to disable every camera in the area. The back doors were propped open from the inside, and a masked suspect was caught on a doorbell camera, carrying a full backpack. This wasn't random. This wasn't a break-in gone wrong. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned down to the minute by people who knew exactly what they were doing, people who studied the house for weeks, people who knew which cameras to disable, people who knew Nancy would be alone. And now, 65 days later, with more than $1 million on the table, every single one of them is silent. That tells you something about who these people are. It tells you something about how organized they are. It tells you something about what they're willing to do to protect themselves. And it tells you something about what might have already happened to the ones who could have talked. The question I keep coming back to is this. If someone offered you $1.2 million to tell what you know and you still didn't call, what would stop you? Loyalty? Fear? Or the fact that you no longer can? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your theory. Do you think someone will eventually break, or has the window already closed? Because 65 days is a long time. And silence this deep doesn't happen by accident. And if you missed the video about the mistake the kidnapper made with Bitcoin, the one the FBI is tracking right now, it's right here. That one changes everything about this case.